Today's episode is a little different and deeply important. Most of you know that Tyfano is co-hosted by me and Professor Joe Delahunty KC. We normally explore leadership, justice, digital transformation and the patterns shaping modern Britain. But today we are turning our focus to something hitting Joe's world head on and exposing one of the most serious failures in public sector digital governance we've seen in years. Before we get into that, I want to acknowledge something important. Joe has just been awarded Family Silk of the Year 2025, and the week before that was voted by the public as the lawyer you most aspire to be. These are extraordinary achievements, and they say something profound about the impact Jo has on the people she represents, the colleagues she inspires, and the justice systems she serves. But, and this is the uncomfortable truth that sets the stage for today, when you hear what Jo and her peers are currently enduring in legal aid, you realise that what she does is far more than a profession. It's a vocation, a calling, something she pursues not for reward, but because families and children and the vulnerable need someone to stand beside them. And thank goodness people like Jo and the many dedicated family lawyers across the country continue to do this work. They are the best of us. But the system they uphold is not treating them with the dignity or stability this work deserves. Back in April, the legal aid agency's core digital systems, the very systems the family bar and solicitors rely on to bill, process and receive payment for publicly funded legal work, were taken offline following a major cyber attack. These systems hold sensitive case data, family records, and the entire billing infrastructure for civil and family legal aid. 6 months later, the system is still offline. It was supposed to be restored in September. It wasn't. The Ministry of Justice then suggested restoration in October. It isn't happening. And here's the most revealing part. The Bar Council's official updates for the Bar page, the page that was intended to give progress updates, shows no update since 25th of September 2025. No timeline, no transparency. In my world, running a business built on data, governance, and resilient data infrastructure, digital infrastructure, this is unthinkable. No modern airline, retailer, or bank could survive losing its billing platform for even 48 hours, let alone for 6 months. Yet a cornerstone of the justice system in the UK, one serving the most vulnerable families, has collapsed and communication stalled. This crisis lands on top of a fee system already weakened by decades of underinvestment. According to the FLBA's briefing, £100 paid in 2001 is now just worth £52. Huge amounts of essential work, reading, drafting, reviewing legal evidence, are actually completely unpaid. So when the payment system collapsed, there was no buffer, no resilience, and no margin. Jo is living this, the profession is living this, and the families awaiting justice are living this. So today, Jo and I are doing what Tyfano was designed to do, taking a hard, honest look at what happened, why it happened, and what it tells us about leadership, digital systems, policy making, and accountability in Britain today. Jo, thank you for being willing to talk about something so close to home. We're back. We're back, Jo.
At last.
Now, and we're talking about something that is very, very close to your heart, and also something that absolutely astounds me. So, before we start, do you want to actually give some context to what legal aid actually is? Because I'm sure
Yeah.
a lot of the
So I
audience
describe legal
don't know.
aid. Yeah, I describe legal aid and the legal aid system as basically the fourth emergency service. It's a bit like the NHS. You don't know that you'll need it until you have to present yourself at A&E. So legal aid is essential in those cases which deal with the real hard interface between um, state oppression and with issues such as immigration or housing or child abuse or crime. And if I put it in a context outside a family, everyone thinks that we need a criminal justice system that's properly funded and supported by a specialist counsel. You don't think you're ever going to need it until, for example, your son is accused of raping a girl on date rape, and then suddenly everything comes to a fore where you know your son is innocent. You want your son to have the best representation possible, and you need there to be a barrister who's going to be there fighting every corner for your child, right?
Yeah.
And the barrister who's going to be provided is going to be a criminal barrister who's going to be paid on legal aid rates. Same in my industry. I'm a child abuse barrister, a family barrister. No one thinks they're going to need the likes of me. They think of family barristers, someone that you might instruct when you're getting divorced. But no one expects to be accused of abusing their child. But when you or someone is, and you know you've not done it, you know you've not caused those fractures, you know you've not shaken your child, then you need a barrister, a legal aid barrister, to act for you to try to convince the court that you've not done those things which the local authority is saying you've done. So we are an invisible resource, but then when you need us to be there with the highest quality. And we are legal aid barristers for a reason. That's because we believe in public service. So we do this work because we have a vocation. The working hours are awful. The working conditions are awful. The courts we work in have got leaks. There's rarely functioning toilets. We operate with massive levels of stress and massive degree of technological overload. And our rates of pay for family barristers were set 20 years ago.
Wow.
And they've not been updated. In fact, there was an austerity cut a few years after the rates were introduced. Yeah, that's it. So our rates were introduced in 2011, and then we had an austerity cut in 2012, 10% to cut down. So the £100 that we might be paid in 2011 is now worth £67, and we go to court for that. So when you consider what the impact it would be to have our access to that income terminated because of a data hack, I want you to reflect on how necessary that money is. It's not like we're fat cat lawyers.
Yeah, and it's not covered by insurance or anything,
No.
anything like that. So,
no, we're paid for. The government pays for us because we're that last level of need, which is why the rates of pay have been set by the government. There's no individual competition for legal aid rates; it's just nationwide, and where therefore our central portal to be paid is hacked, as we're about to discuss. That means, one, all the data that we provided, so our financial data. Two, all the financial data that members of the public have provided. Three, the money. All of that is at large. And that's why, as we'll discuss, and you're going to explain to me how the hell this has happened, when it was hacked earlier this year, the whole system shut down.
I think I can try and uncover it, but trying to explain why it's happened in this day and age is going to be something that we might both find challenging. So, can you explain what the cyber attack? I mean, I think you've done it at a high level, but what the cyber attack actually took down and why you are unable to be paid and billed overnight, and when did it specifically happen?
So I'm going to pause in a moment to call up the exact dates, but I'm going to give you a global answer first of all, and then we can go into the detail. We first found out in April, I think it was, that there'd been a data hack, and members of the public listening to this will know if they had a Marks and Spencer's account, because around that same time, that's when Marks and Spencer's were hacked. That got lots of coverage. The middle class people who were desperate about their M&S accounts and the security had lots of information being poured out from all news outlets. That was in sharp contrast to the silence in respect of legal aid. And you may ask a number of questions about why that is and why it didn't attract the same coverage.
Yeah, I mean that's the immediate question. So I am going to ask it. Why didn't it get the same level of coverage?
Opinions. They may not be anything other than purely subjective, but you're welcome to them. What we were told was that because hackers had got access to the entire system, the entire portal was going to be shut down. That meant in one blow, we lost access to all of our income. Now, just to explain that, I am paid by the government. The government don't pay me regularly. I am still owed fees for the past 5 years, for example. How they pay me is a matter of mystery. When they recoup payments, which they do, it's a matter entirely within the gift of some technological gods that we don't know the names of. So when they shut our payment system down, it deprived me of earnings that I had already earned and were due to be paid. As I say, some amounting to 5 years of debt.
5 years ago. Yeah.
Even more. I mean, I
And,
know my
and,
colleagues
and,
have got some 10 years owed. And we pay we
and
pay tax on aged debt.
so you pay tax on the debt.
Yeah.
Do you get paid interest on the
No.
outstanding amounts?
No.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, I think that that deserves a moment to pause and reflect on that, because that is incredible. I mean,
Yeah.
it's astounding that you would have to wait so long to be paid by the government. But HMRC seem to be on top of it if you're paying the tax.
Yeah. Yeah. And so we pay tax on deemed fees that have not been due, that have not been paid to us, without knowing when we're going to be paid them. We lose value, obviously, for every pound we earn by every year's delay. We drive ourselves further into debt. It's a process which impacts more on those of us that choose to do legal aid work out of a sense of social duty, which means if you look at the bar stats, it tends to be those of us like me who come from non-traditional backgrounds to the barrister. It tends to be um, candidates that come from that aren't white, male and middle class and public school educated. So we come from a lower pool of people that don't have the reservoirs of income to tide us over, and where we have a number of caring duties in the main. So when our income is tied up by the government in a fund that we can't get access to generally, and we're reliant upon them when they pay us, and we're paying tax on it, and then you cut us off from those fees that we've earned, then it's a question of how do we survive? Because obviously the income still needs to come out, the mortgages still need to be paid, the food bills still need to be paid, the electric, everything
The
still comes out.
Let's cycle back a second, because what you said earlier on, when the cyber attack happened, there was no redundancy. There was a single point of failure. What you said earlier on is that the portal by which you get paid and can apply for payments got completely shut down.
Yeah.
So there is no redundancy built into the system. It just got cut off.
Seems not to be a backup. What it's important we do is so the select committee heard evidence about this, I think about 6 weeks ago. That's actually the most generous amount of information we've been given. First of all, when we were told, we learnt, I think in April or May, that it had first happened. How far extended has been a gradually evolving piece of information. I first learned by looking at the select committee evidence that in fact now the data that's been accessed goes back potentially 18 years. So that means
Wow.
that everyone who has been paid or has requested payments through the LAA, that data going back 18 years was still on the portal. It would peer through some IT legacy industry. And second issue, why was it still vulnerable? What I don't understand is why it was that when the MOJ were aware back in 2022, and I'm reading here, our estate was assessed as the most complex and fragile in the MOJ, and they therefore secured 8.4 million in 2022 to try to resolve it. They couldn't get to grips with the degree of
Sorry, that
stakes. Yeah.
that
So another,
terminology is really important. What you've just said there is
yeah,
they tried to resolve it. Says to me that they tried to fix the legacy environment rather than investing in a new environment, which is probably the most appropriate thing to do at that juncture. If you knew that it was as fragile as it was
yeah.
in 2022, that's not so long ago, you would be considering building new on new systems and new environments rather than investing in the old. And
I
it
think that's got to
says
be right.
that, yeah,
I think it's got to be right because I'm going to read out what Harbottle said. All right, Harbottle, if I just go back up to the text, Jane Harbottle, the chief executive of the Legal Aid Agency. So this is what she told MPs. And if language is important, Paul, I'm going to read it out by virtue of a direct quote. She said this in quotes. In 2022-23, our estate was assessed as the most complex and fragile in the MOJ, and funding of 8.4 million was secured to start to address the technical debt. She continues, quote, the scale and complexity of the digital estate meant that investment wasn't sufficient. We secured another 10.5 million in 2024. And it was that 10.5 that put the monitoring in place, which allowed us to detect the attack when it happened. It also laid the groundwork for us replacing the most vulnerable part of the system called the legal aid portal. So, she says, we knew there was an issue. We got funding. Was it enough time? And was there enough to stop the attack? No. Now, how can it be right that if you know there's a problem back in 2022 and you know
yeah.
that the impact of it is going to be through the legal aid portal, which has data going back for 18 years on it of the most invasive, intimate degree possible, and you know that you can't stop that data risk of exposure happening, and yet you allow it to continue with the consequences it had, how can that be
And
an effective use of
you're
funding?
you're investing in technical debt, which is never a wise thing to do without a backup, and
No backup.
it's
Yep.
no backup. Um, I mean, the one kind of saving grace of the things that you've said is, given that you haven't been paid in the last 5 years, is actually they've had the data for you going back 18 years now. They've lost it, but at least they somewhere on the system there is a record that you should have been paid.
Well,
So
not quite,
are you
because when we don't have
are you
access,
the
so the whole system has been shut down. So what the Bar Council and Law Society did very swiftly through the aid of the Bar Council is they tried to put in place an agreement with the MOJ that we would have contingency payments under an entirely new system until it was safe to go back to the previous portal. We're not back on that yet. What that means is, since the hack was discovered, there have been effectively grace and favour payments under emergency provisions for barristers and indeed solicitors, I'm sure, to claim monies going forward to let the businesses go forward. But it's on a loan basis. So that's going to be recouped as soon as the system is in place. All right, so point one. Point two,
so
if
that's
like
a,
me,
and you're paying tax on that loan?
yeah. If, like me, you don't trust the recoupment process, I haven't applied for these grace and favour emergency contingency funds. Instead, I've just overloaded my case, taken trial upon trial upon trial, and have billed that trial as soon as I've finished. So I've not accessed a debt. Instead, what I've done is claim money that I actually know I've earned. But the
Yeah,
big point that we're missing here and I want to address is I am still cut off from all of my earnings pre the hack, which is why I've been
everything.
working my socks off to try to get money
Yeah,
in since it happened. And I have not been told, and I can't find any place where I've been told, when I'm going to be able to get access to my aged debt upon which I'm still paying tax. So I'm still cut off from my previous earnings. Yeah.
and you're paying tax on those earnings.
And I'm paying tax on my earnings. So I don't
Okay.
yet have a system that, or even an answer that I can trust, which tells me with clarity when I am expected to be paid the monies that's in the accounts that I have already earned and I am due, why there's a delay in accessing that to me. And I believe it's because all of that data is currently under quarantine. And therefore, for how
Mm.
long I and my colleagues are going to have to continue on a needs must basis. And the
I think
impact of
that
that is huge.
you said a word there which is important. Presumably, all of the communication that you've been getting is about trying to restore trust in the system, and
Yeah.
get you back to a position where you do trust what's going on. But it doesn't sound as if that's been happening either.
No, it's like extracting blood from a stone, just in terms of money, but also information. We were promised a resumption date, I think, in September, and
Yeah,
that passed. October, November passed. I think as of an email I got in just before we started recording, we're told that the two trial chambers which were nominated to work under the new system now means that's going to be rolled out, but at what pace and how, I don't know. But it doesn't answer the monies that are due to us already. And the impact is that we're walking away.
yeah,
So
yeah.
to
So
be in an industry where our rates of pay were set 20 years ago, where the divide between legal aid income and privately paid income is so massive, the division at the bar, which not many people are prepared to talk about openly, but I am, is how in the same chambers you can have an exponentially different income if you manage or deal with cases which are privately paid versus if you choose to act in legal aid. And
yeah, I mean,
those of us,
so I was going to say to you, what's the practical impact been? But I think you're kind of starting to articulate it. On,
we're
you know,
walking away.
if it was, yeah, we talk as a business a lot about supply chain fragility,
Mm.
and when, you know, a fundamental part of the supply chain breaks down in the way that this has, I mean, I can't imagine an environment where people would still be working for our business and not being paid, and not having been paid for such a long time. So when you talked earlier on about it being a vocation, it truly is, because
Yeah,
this is this is madness.
we do,
Under
because it
any other
matters.
environment, you would walk away.
And it's traded on. You know, that desire to reinvest back in a fragile society, particularly when the society we see around us is more toxic than I can remember it being. When our desire to make sure that the public are protected from the worst excesses, whether that's false allegations, whether you're innocent or guilty, but you've got a right to a trial and a fair trial. When we do that at the cost to our own family by going to court not knowing if we're going to be paid or when we're going to be paid, and we look around and we see colleagues with equal skills earning so much more money, then we have to question why we do it, because we're putting not just our own well-being at risk but also the security of our family. And to be really brutal, Paul, when I go and do the talks I do in academies about what it means to become a professional rather than following the path that is otherwise destined for you at school, which might be leaving to go, to work in a factory or to simply go out to earn money rather than go on to
Yeah,
further education. I can no longer tell those students about the passion I feel for legal aid and yet encourage them to do it, because how can I bring them into my legal aid world when they come into it with debt they can't afford to handle through university fees, and they're coming into a low paid field? Why should they do it? And the answer is they shouldn't.
and
They should have a leg
so
up, not be pulled down.
correct me if I'm wrong on this, but if someone was coming into the profession now and is recently qualified, and they went under this kind of average payment scheme that they've put in place to kind of tide people over, that is, as you said, is a loan. So they would have loans from university debt, and then they would have loans effectively from the day that they started working in a legal aid environment now.
Potentially. I mean, yeah, particularly in crime where you're thrown into the deep end very early on
Yeah,
because you do Crown Court trials. I mean, and if you're a family barrister, then again, some of the early meat work that you do is going to be doing domestic abuse trials, for example.
yeah,
That's often done by very junior people. We don't think it should be, but it is, because it's not regarded as weighty as it should be. If you take the word domestic out, it would be, but as soon as you add that
yeah,
word, it becomes almost trivialized in terms of its importance. But that's what lots of our new starters do in legal aid work. And so, yeah, there'd be how they would manage to survive on carrying the legacy of debt and then the ongoing debt is simply unheard of. And why should I ask the people who I believe can make a difference to the bar by making it more diverse. Why should I invite them to come into this world which is inviting a lower stream of income and a more erratic one? And yet, when I
Yeah,
go to schools and I talk about the type of work we do, the very work they're interested in is crime, is immigration, is family. They're
yeah.
not interested in commercial law. It doesn't have any resonance to them, and they hear my passion about it. They hear the stories about the families that got the children back that wouldn't otherwise do. They hear about the success and the feeling what it's like to cross-examine. So I inspire them with what I do, and yet I can no longer say to them financially it's a course
Justify
worth
coming
pursuing.
into. Yeah.
So if seniors
Oh,
like me are seriously questioning why we stay in it, and I know colleagues who are leaving and redirecting their careers, and if I, for example, and others can't encourage the young aspiring barristers to do it, where's the resource going to be
and
when you need it?
talk, talk to me a little bit more about what is covered within legal aid, because I was quite astonished when I was doing the research for this podcast about what is not covered within legal aid at the moment. Because you would expect, given the sheer amount of volume of things that you have to read through and go through before you go into a courtroom, that obviously that is valuable time that you are spending, and it's based on your expert knowledge of what is and isn't admissible, for example, in a courtroom. Um, some of that, or all of it, is not covered. The prep
No,
work
that's right.
is not
So, for
covered by
example, in the work
legal
I
aid.
do, um, say I'm working on a trial that's going to last for 11 days or more, it's called working under events. I get paid only for the days I'm in court and for 2 meetings with the other barristers and for 2 client conferences in a case that could last as long as a year. And the court will regularly direct that we have lawyers' meetings called advocates' meetings, but they order them, perhaps not understanding that even when they do, they order it nonetheless for us to do that pro bono. And we do because it's important. For every hearing, we draft skeleton arguments, which are a mixture of law and fact. They're unpaid. They can take hours, sometimes days to do. Closing submissions can often take more than days to do in complex cases, and they're really substantial legal documents on law and fact. They're unpaid. We get directed to draft questions to medical experts for the letters of instruction. We are directed to draft questions to the experts to save the cost of them coming to court. That's all unpaid. We pour into people's data history, so phone downloads, which can cover tens of thousands of pages. That's preparation work, which is not paid. Reading the papers isn't paid.
Wow. Yeah.
So we get
Yeah.
paid
So
for the
all of the
point of
documentation.
contact issues.
Okay. And
And
nothing.
again, don't forget, that's the rates of pay that were set 20 years ago. Even for those things we are paid for, like direct
Yeah.
point contact, being in court, 2 client columns, 2 advocates meetings. That's for fees that were set 20 years ago.
So in real terms, I think we had that number earlier on. In real terms, that's £100 down to
I think it's
£52. I
down
think.
to somewhere between £55 and £60 now an hour.
Wow, wow, um, that's that's
And just
pretty
remember the
shocking.
cases we do. So we deal with cases where a child has died, and the question
Yeah,
is, has a parent killed that child or not? We deal with cases about really chronic sex abuse. Has a child been sexually abused within the family? Is it safe for the child to remain in the family? We deal with cases where there are serious non-fatal injuries, so multiple fractures, brain injuries. It requires us to cross-examine, neuropathologists, pathologists, ophthalmologists. We cross-examine blood experts. We cross-examine bone experts,
yeah.
psychiatrists,
So
psychologists.
you're expected to have the expertise
Yeah.
and to bring that to bear with all of the research, with all of the background knowledge that you have,
You don't
without
just switch it on,
being
do you,
paid for
in
it.
court? Yeah.
No. So, um,
I'll just give an
I
example. The
mean,
case I've just finished, we had a data dump because the police provided the mobile data mid-trial. So we received 16,000 pages of data on day 2 of the trial. And we kept going. We just worked and worked and worked to process it and to share it out between all of us to get it done. Don't get paid for going through material like that. You don't get paid for the nights you don't go to sleep.
wow. and you wouldn't sleep if you didn't go through that and
No,
find
'cause
the
it makes
one
a
piece of
difference.
evidence that will make a difference. Yeah. Wow. Sorry, I mean, as someone in the data industry and is constantly speaking to clients and to organizations about making sure that you have backups of data, making sure that legacy systems are made redundant, making sure that you have the redundancy and the fail-safe options set up. I just find it incredibly shocking that not only the system could go down, but also that the system could be put at risk in such a significant way by all of this. I mean, surely it's not just the barristers, but the chambers
And
and
solicitors.
uh,
We're in
solicitors
it
and
together.
the
Yeah.
and and the people who are going to court, the individuals that you're defending or fighting
Yeah.
for, they it, are they these people must surely
How do they
now be put
know?
at
I think the
risk.
question is, how do they know? Do they know their data's been hacked?
Yeah, yeah.
Because what we learn
Well,
from the
well,
same
we've got yeah,
exchange is that we can't be told, the MPs weren't told exactly how many people have been impacted through the access to 18 years of data. So we know the years, all right? We know that the problem was detected in 2024. We still don't know, or rather, it's not clear by way of the question answer exchange we have, exactly how many people have been impacted upon by it.
yeah. Okay. So, I mean, it feels like there are no answers. You're not getting any answers to any of the questions that you would just naturally have as a result of a data breach. Who's impacted? How many
Yeah.
customers?
And that's why it comes down to trust.
In a business environment, you go, how many customers? What do we have? How can we get everything back up and running again as fast as possible? As you say, M&S got all the coverage at the same time that this was happening
Mm.
to you.
And I think
And
the issue I'd like to make clear is that's not for lack of trying. So, really, huge amount of hard work has gone in by the heads of our respective specialist divisions. So, the FLBA, James Roberts, and Leslie Stevens have done a huge amount of work. The chair of the Bar Council, Barbara Mills, and the people she's got there. And I'm only naming the barrister side. There'll be parallel people who've been heroes on the solicitor side. But the point is that however much knowledge and how much pushing they're done, if I, as a intelligent user, am darting between select committee answers, updates which we get through the LAA sent into chambers, and I'm still unclear about where these answers are to the quite simple questions I'm asking, then why isn't there a central portal that I can easily find that type of information to understand or to reassure me? It shouldn't need to be a detective trail,
yeah,
particularly on top of the fact we're still going to court, Paul. We're still going to court.
well, is this
That's the day
affecting
job.
is it affecting court outcomes? Do you think? I mean, is it?
I
It's,
think we're
it's certainly
protecting. I
affecting
think we're protecting the public from
motivation.
it.
Yeah,
I think we hold and absorb it. Every solicitor that does legal aid will be absorbing the sheer terror of how they pay their staff. Every partner will be wondering what income cut they take in order to make sure the system can still keep going. Every barrister is wondering whether we can carry on doing this work or whether we should diversify or leave. But in the main,
um,
we're trying to make sure that the day jobs are done. And because you don't go into a case to do a half job, then we still go into it with passion and with principle. So we still protect the public from the consequences. The impact is going to be longer term. Will we still do it
it,
for the next
it
client?
doesn't it in in a normal industry, and I what is normal industry these days, but in a normal industry, it everyone would be scrabbling around as I'm going to use the example again. M&S did, Co-op did, to fix it and to restore confidence in the system with all of their customers. It doesn't feel like there is that scrabble around, and the MOJ and the LAA truly understand the level of impact or harm
Anger.
caused and trust that needs to be restored.
That's right. I think that's right. I gave an interview for the Bar Council. I think it was in September now, and it was meant to be on the subject of mental health and well-being. And my title for it was edited out. But my title was "I'm not mad, I'm fucking furious," and that's exactly how I feel,
Hmm. Yeah,
because this is insult upon injury for what we do.
yeah. It is, especially at the level that you're being paid, and also, yeah. I mean, it's it's astounding. Um,
And so little
and I kind of
interest, Paul. So little interest. It's the Guardian's covered it occasionally, and obviously it got coverage when the Select Committee was giving their evidence for that moment. But on a scale of interest levels for the press, for the public, how much of this did you know?
no, I mean, I know this because I know you, and it's it's barely covered anywhere. So, um, I mean, particularly within the technology industry, it's the big things are shouted about. 350 million loss for M&S is shouted about because that affects shareholders. But um,
Oh, that's the
we're all
intro
share,
there. See, it affects
we're,
shareholders. I've not thought
we're,
about that.
we're, we're all shareholders in Team UK, and that's
Mm.
just it astounds me that we can let this level of inefficiency and failure happen in this day and age.
Well, can I ask you another
There's
question
no
about?
reason for it.
Can I ask you a question about responsibility then? So, if I learn from the Select Committee that the MOJ knew this was an issue back in 2022, and to the degree that they then asked and got 8.5 million, and then again 2024 they got 10.5 to address it, at what point should I, as a user, have been alerted to that risk in order to make an informed decision? For example, about whether I wanted to protect my own data or I wanted to ask questions about it. If this was an
Well,
industry where that was discovered to
uh,
be an issue, and yet for the users to be unaware until the risk which was anticipated materialized and took effect, where's the
so
level of culpability for that I was not put on notice?
so as an individual, as a user of the system, as someone who continued to contribute to that system, you should have been
Yeah.
made aware at that juncture. And actually, under data protection law and GDPR guidance as well, the level of information that was held within you, it should have been. That's an almost separate legal case that needs to be brought, because one of the questions I had for you actually was, should you be entitled to compensation,
Mm.
or should the profession expect compensation or redress if it was a known issue back in 2022, and it feels like it was because they said it was.
Well,
It
Mr.
was a
Harcourt said so.
known issue. Um, I think that the understanding of the level of the issue and the impact that it would have on the profession should something go wrong was never really fully understood. Otherwise, you would have asked for a lot more money up front.
Well, certainly been trying
Not
to get my
not
agent debt in, wouldn't I? Whether I'd have
yeah.
succeeded is another matter. But
Oh,
I might have made decisions about
not
quarantining. I might have
yeah,
set up a
not
new account, mightn't I?
yeah. A new account, different password protection. I mean, but you still haven't been fully notified as to the level of exposure that you've got.
No, we got when the data was hacked, we started getting generic warnings. You know, this password may have been compromised. I think your listeners will be very familiar with those, but
Yeah.
nothing of the type of detail that said, for example, you're now on notice. We advise that you seek security, data security guidance or financial. It was pretty generic. the other thing being at the time that we were coping with the consequences, which was having no income. So we
Mm.
were right like rabbits in a headlight. The fact that it's gone on
Is
for
it?
so long, it is has just compounded, I think, the sheer exhaustion and
Um,
impacted on trust.
yeah, and so I mean, we've talked a bit about the under resourcing and underfunding of legal aid as far as the profession's concerned, but it feels like it's systemic within the organisation as well, because an organisation that was set up for a technological future that we're all in at the moment actually would have invested in the environment that everything sits on. So you've not only got the underfunding that's going on within your environment, but also it feels like the system at the centre has been underfunded as well. Um,
So let me
and
just play that.
and
So, as in layman's terms, what you're saying to me is that the very system that pays us, the one that's been identified as being so flaky that it was ripe for targeting and then was targeting, that itself was poorly resourced in terms of people being able to make it fit for purpose. Because isn't that pretty basic, being fit for purpose? Secure enough?
poorly resourced and poorly managed. I mean,
Yeah,
there absolutely needs to be a root and branch uncovering of exactly what's happened, and this is it's disaster. Any sort of disaster recovery strategy or plan would have a disaster recovery strategy and plan in place, and there doesn't appear to have been one.
so that was a question I was going to ask you because given that there was a red risk flag raised from 2022, and
Yep.
therefore they must have had to have anticipate a breach because that was the risk. Would you anticipate that in those two circumstances that you'd have a disaster recovery architecture? I know it's terminology you've used. I'm not quite sure I understand it.
That would be the so basic in simplest terms. If you're hacked, you have, or if you're compromised in some way. If someone switches off all of the servers, you have a backup in place. Everyone has a backup of that. You have a backup of your iPad. Your your backup is there to restore you back up and get you back up and running in the way that you were working immediately to the disaster that your iPad stopped working happens.
Yeah,
In every single organization, it is normal practice now to have a backup in place, and also to have the protection in place to stop or to have the first and second lines of defense for hackers actually trying to get into the organization in the first place. So they knew about it in 2022. In 2022, though, the terminology that you used quite early on, and you were quoting directly,
mm,
what they weren't doing, it doesn't sound as if what they were doing was actually trying to get to a point where they had a adequate, up to date backup in place. They were trying
yeah,
to keep architecture, legacy architecture, going for longer, rather than identifying how to fix that legacy architecture for the future and re-platform everything and
yeah.
get a backup of everything that they have in place.
The way
So
I
they
read that answer,
continued to support the
yeah,
architecture.
the way I read that answer was they were continuing to investigate the scale of the problem. They
Yeah.
hadn't got to the stage of one, addressing the problem, or two, creating an alternative that meant the problem would not materialize from predicted risk into actual risk.
Let's take an additional point, which is they spent 10 million in 2024 on technology that would allow them to identify if there'd been a data breach. At the point of implementation of that technology, they identified that there was a data breach. So There could have been earlier data breaches.
Mm.
That's just not known. So the only difference between 2024 and beforehand was that they actually had the technology in place to identify that there'd been a breach.
I think you've hit the nail on the head. 2022, our estate was assessed as the most complex and fragile. Funding of 8.4 million secured to start to address the technical debt. Okay, technical debt. You might need to explain that to me. The scale and complexity of the digital estate meant that investment wasn't sufficient. We secured another 10.5 million in 2024. That put the monitoring in place, which enabled us to detect the attack when it happened.
The digital estate is the infrastructure that they're now starting to put everything on. So, digital estate is the cloud-based infrastructure or the technology that they're now putting everything onto. And it's a generic term, so she's not being specific with that term. Technical debt is we actually work with another government organisation who have one of the environments that we support for them is built on Windows Vista 2008. Now, we're starting not to have data engineers that were born or certainly too long into school when Windows Vista 2008 came out. So that's a good example of some technical debt within an organisation that is a government-based organisation that should have been retired a long time ago, because there just aren't people around to support it these days. And the legacy debt or the technical debt that they have could be anything from servers, physical infrastructure servers held, in an office somewhere versus in a secure data center and that has people sitting on it. So sitting and looking at it all the time to check it. So many years ago, a lot of organizations moved all of their data infrastructure into data centers so that they could be a little bit more secure. Legacy and technical debt is technology that should have been retired a long time ago and is just being held together in ways that allows the organization to function and continue as it is rather than to actually accelerate or perform and do anything substantive with.
Well, that makes sense because that makes sense of the next answer, because I was querying how many of us have been affected. We know the potential, which is anyone who's ever received a payment through legal aid is potentially compromised. But when she was asked specifically how many people it impacted upon, she said, quote, "It's very difficult at this moment in time to give you or to give to the ICO a number of unique records of people who've been impacted. This is because of the way our systems are structured and the way it stores the data. We have 48 different systems, 120 different components, all of which house various buckets of data, and the data appears as a number of transactions." So translate that for me, because the way I read that is they don't understand the scale of the issue because the data is held in so many different portals with so many different substructures that actually it's like staring at the sea and asking how many creatures there are in it. You know it's the sea, but you don't know what's beneath the surface. Is that a really pathetic analogy?
That is a very good analogy, but also what I would kind of enhance it is it's like when you look at the portal, when you were looking at the portal previously, and you were looking at the portal and submitting your claims for legal aid previously, you would log in, um, you would it would identify you, it would recognize your credentials. When that says to me that when it might look like a sexy front end on the portal, I'm sure it didn't. I'm sure it was kind of a clunky front end as well. But when you logged in, it would go and get your login credentials from a place and return path say, yep, that is Joe Delahunty, she's logged in correctly. Then your records might be stored in a different environment. So whilst it looks like it's presenting everything to you as in one simple front end, it's going and collecting all of the data in order to be able to give you an answer from lots of different environments. And
Does
you,
that mean
Joe
it's
Delahunty,
those are different weak points?
multiple weak points. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Okay. So
yeah.
that now makes sense because uh, if that if that
If
patchwork
you don't
effect,
know, yeah, if you don't know where the point of entry was, the simplest way to stop everything from leaking is to shut everything down,
which is what they
which is
did.
what they've done. Which is what they've done. And but they had 2 years of knowing that their systems were creaking, where they could have actually started to migrate everything. It feels from the terminology and the words that were being used that what they did during those 2 years is figure out how to support the existing environment rather than how to migrate it.
I'm not going
I
to.
think.
I think you've been
I
generous in saying that 2 years. If they knew in 2022 that the estate was compromised,
if they reported
such
it in
that they needed
2022, yeah,
8 million, right? And then they knew they couldn't cope with the problem, so they asked for another 10 million in 2024, then they've been on notice for a number of years
mm,
without setting up a disaster recovery program, without alerting the users to the risk that we were exposed to and continuing to be exposed to, and
yeah,
without anticipating the consequences so as to be able to put a remedy in when that anticipated risk came to materialize. I mean, that's negligent.
yep. Yep. So they obviously knew about it ahead of 2022 because they were asking for the money to try and
Yeah.
fix it in 2022. In 2024, they probably identified that there was a risk to the environment being compromised in some way more than they expected. I think that there's an element of materiality to the fact that in 2024 they put the technology in place to understand if a breach could happen. They then identified a breach,
Mm.
and then they've shut everything down. So, what is important from that statement is that there could have been multiple breaches ahead of that technology being put in place.
Okay, another question
So,
then about terminology. Right, just reading. I'm still on select committee evidence because this has not been widely discussed at the bar. We've
yeah,
had the updates from the LAA through the MOJ, but it's to the select committee that I'm going to get the answers. So she says, when the LAA took the system down in May, HMCTS had to, quote, activate their manual contingency. What does that mean?
they basically have got a load of people working in the background to get everything back up again. It's not a
Just
it's not a it's not a digital environment. It is there is no there's no backup in place. They've got manual people, actually processing the work and the payments. So
so for
that's
2025.
in 2025. They
Fingers
are
on keyboards, eyes
manually.
on screens.
Yeah, they didn't have a digital contingency in place.
I thought that's what it meant, which is why I've gone back to it because that hadn't leapt out at me until just now. I mean,
Yeah,
that's like going back to
manual.
Stone Age.
Manual doesn't mean anything other than I'm sorry, I'm laughing, but I don't know in a business environment in a and in a government environment this is just negligence.
Yeah.
It's nothing short of negligence, which is kind of back to the earlier point about should there be compensation in place. There should probably be some form of compensation in place for those who've been affected, but at the moment they don't know who's been affected. So
Don't know who's been
um,
affected, and don't think the questions that we're asking. The reason that I wanted to do this podcast with you is because there is so much fury and so much anger amongst my colleagues. And that means barristers and solicitors. Our legal aid network is as tight and strong as we have to be to get through it. we are supporting one another in order to try to keep momentum going to make sure we still go to court and still deliver the services we do. But the fury is building up, as is
Mm.
the frustration about the lack of accountability. So we're told the new system is going to be up and running once it's got through the past two trial chambers. We're not told how effective that's going to be overall and how quickly. We're not told how soon we'll be able to get access to our earnings that are currently still tapped off.
So you don't know.
Also, we're
So
not
one
told
of my
who's
questions,
responsible.
yeah. I mean,
So
one of my
why
questions.
should we carry on? Sorry, I didn't mean to talk over you, Paul, but just on the question of trust, which is, so we're told there's a new system up and running and two chambers have been guinea pigs. Why should I have any more confidence that that system has been better designed and is better protected than the former? It's newer, but do I know how the old system was allowed to continue in under such a corrupted, inefficient regime for so long? No, I don't. Are the same
Well,
people in charge of creating and implementing the new system? I don't know. I'm only told that it's going to be more efficient because that's what I'm simply told.
if
Why
your
now
if your
should I trust
data
that?
had been if your data had been compromised by a commercial organisation, would you continue to leave your data with them? And there is the kind of the inertia that happens with it with a few people, but actually most people would walk. Their feet do the talking, and they would walk under similar circumstances. And I think that I have had two questions, but I think you've answered one of them. That there's what they're not doing at the moment is communicating with you about what the new system is going to deliver that is materially different to the old to the old system. And secondly, that new system, if you don't know what it's doing, how's it going to deal with the backlog? And have you been communicated to about what the backlog, what the system can do in terms of dealing with that backlog?
No, you know what we have been told about, Paul? We've been told how the recoupments for the emergency payments are going to operate.
So they've told you how they're going to get their money back.
Yeah.
They haven't told you how you're going to get your money back. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. So, and when are those recoupments happening? Is
They
it
start to
basically as
happen
soon
as
as you
soon as
get online?
I'll read. So they start to happen with immediate effect once the new system rolls out. So the email we just got in. Right, okay, let me just read this. Let me read this out to you and we'll see if it triggers anything. Right, so this was sent to us on the 19th of November. Commencing on the 10th of November, 2 test sets were given restored access in order to test the system and provide feedback. The most recent communication from the LAA indicates the process for general access will start in earnest from 24th of November. Oh, today. It's going to be carefully monitored in order to preempt any issues with large volumes of claims. Then it says, draft guidance in relation to the operation of the recoupment system, which will commence 2 weeks after full operation has been restored. So we've even got a deadline, right, for when they're going to start the recoupment. So 2 weeks.
So, if you don't sit on your computer and put in all of your legacy activity, all of the activity from what date did the
So basically, it says
did
from
the
the, so it
payments?
says so if I summarise, it says that 2 chambers were given restored access on the 10th of November. So basically, and the new system is therefore been deemed to roll out from the 24th of November. So that means 2 weeks trial with 2 chambers, sufficient to start rolling out. Questions in my head already about the efficacy of that. It then rolls out, and then once it rolls out, 2 weeks after full operation has been restored, query what full operation means. That means every chambers in the UK don't know. But then they start the recoupment process for the emergency payments that have been given for the past 6 months. So that tells me there is a trial system that's had 2 weeks testing and it's going to be rolled out. It tells me that they are going to start the recoupments for the emergency payments. It doesn't tell me about the backlog. It tells me effectively that claims for ongoing cases can now be accessed through this new portal.
Yeah. So what it doesn't tell you as well is why the system is different and why you should trust that system versus the old system. So here are the things that I would want to know if I was anyone in your profession right now, sitting in your environment. And you know, the answers to these questions might be complex, but actually they are the questions that you should be asking, which is, what is the architecture? What are we actually now putting our data on? What's the infrastructure? How's it resilient? And is it modern and up to date? And does it have the right protections and controls in place? Second one, what's the data governance? And what is the leadership and accountability that you would want to put in place for this? A leader who is taking accountability for a data environment of such significant importance would not be using words in the way that they have done previously when sitting in front of a select committee. They would be using more forceful words about having absolute confidence in the system and making sure that this could never, ever happen again. What assurances have the profession been given that that is the case? I mean, and also, you know, how are you going to catch up on all of the payments that haven't been made and what's happened for the last God knows how many years? And the other point, which is, if it's been reinstated, if they've reinstated the system as it was, and probably for expediency they have done that, they have reinstated the system based on a 2001 to 2010 set of workflows, rather than how you would do it today. So have they gone for just speed of getting everything back up and running again, and therefore they've just replicated everything as it was, or have they actually designed a system for the future and
future-proofing?
And if you've not been communicated to, I think those questions have to be asked, and you have to have those assurances moving forward.
And what's our alternative, Paul? Single provider.
Yeah.
There is no alternative for us unless we stop doing the work. Not an alternative, but to continue to trust the MOJ. The alternative being we walk away because there is no alternative provider.
What message would you want to send to the policymakers listening today? And I mean, as far as I'm concerned, having a resilient, robust, and trusted system is not optional. But what would your message be?
Stop taking our existence for granted. Do you want a public defender system like they've got in the States? Because unless you do, you're going to need to start to respect the work we do, pay for it properly, and understand that we do it at personal cost. And the alternative is a much better paid profession elsewhere.
Yeah.
We've had enough.
Not brilliant, but brilliant. Thank you.